Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. It is the midweek episode, and we are getting ready for the Leagues Cup. Inter Miami, the defending champions, looking to defend their crown. We're going to talk about the Leagues Cup. We're going to talk about the rules, the rule changes, what Inter Miami did last year, who might be the breakout star of this campaign. But that's all going to wait for the second half of this episode. Before any of that, we're going to start with a look back on the last 6 weeks. Inter Miami played 7 games since Messi and Suarez and Rojas went to the Copa America. And I went back and looked at our podcast episode when that was about to happen. And I looked at some of the talking points I had and some of the things we wanted to see and some of the things we were afraid of and what our predictions were. And, I listened to that podcast over, and I think my takeaway was we know this team really well, but I want to go back and have some of those same conversations now with this fresh perspective because A, Yannick Bright is everything we thought he was going to be, and B, Tata Martino deserves a lot of credit for that. But before all of that, as always, I'm your host, Scotty. I'm here with my co-host, Saur. How you feeling today, man?
I'm great. A little bit tired because I just played softball. And can I just say, football is the superior sport. Softball is so boring. You just stand around, hit one ball, and then you're back in the pavilion. It's annoying. So I'd rather play football any day of the week. And I'm glad we're now here talking about football and talking about Inter Miami because the weekend's big, man. We got to beat another Mexican team, which we failed to do the first time. So no nervous.
You sound like someone who struck out once and grounded out to the third baseman once.
No, I didn't strike out even once. I hit the ball every single time I was up, and I got run out once. Yeah.
Any hits in there at all?
Yeah, a few.
Okay.
Of course.
Of course.
I almost had a homer. Yeah. I got a 3 RBI. I don't know what that means, but I was told that was very good.
I'm going to move on because this conversation is going to upset me.
No, before you move on, cricket's the better sport. All right, now you can move on.
Anyways, guys, I will be talking about the Leagues Cup. I'll be talking about this last podcast that we did. No, but to be serious, you had a good day. You're having a good week. It's the All-Star break. The All-Star game is happening as we speak. It's never been that fun as far as I can tell, but maybe we should have timed this a little bit better. I don't know. Jordi Alba and Sergio Busquets starting in that game. Luis Suarez got to skip it because he has a new foot injury that hopefully is nothing. Hopefully it's just an excuse to miss the All-Star game.
I think it's just an excuse, yeah.
And the Olympics started today, which means Benjamin Kramaski, who did not play for the U.S. Olympic team, did not come off the bench in a 3-0 loss to France. And Paraguay, Diego Gomez did start for Paraguay, and they lost 5-0 to Japan. It's not a great day for our Herons at the Olympics.
Did you see the Argentina game? I know none of our Herons were involved in the Argentina game, but that's potentially the most insane piece of refereeing and the most controversial game I've seen in my lifetime. It was horrendous.
I heard it was controversial, but I don't know what actually happened.
So, as far as I'm aware, Morocco is winning the game 2-1. Argentina score in the last minute. They had like 16 minutes overtime, and they score in extra time 16 minutes. They score in the 106th minute, and there's a pitch invasion by the Moroccan fans, so they call off the game. It's suspended for the time being. The players come back on the pitch 2 hours later. The first thing that the referees do is go to VAR and cancel the goal that Argentina scored. Played another 3 minutes of that game, and Morocco won. Absolutely wild scenes, and potentially the worst case of refereeing I would have seen. I don't know why they did that or the way they did it was absolutely horrible. But anyways.
Was it the right decision, the VAR, to overturn?
I think so. I'm not too sure whether it was the right decision. And also, the players were back in their, warmed down, ready to go home, relaxed in their hotel, and they get called back on the pitch. Wild scenes. Never seen anything like it.
Listen, this is the Olympics. They have a different standard for how they do things in
That is
soccer.
true.
They want to make sure they get it right, not that they do it fast or expedient. No, Argentina, you'd have to imagine, would be one of the favorites to medal in that competition, them and France, and not a great start if you're losing in the first game to Morocco. As I know very well, because the U.S. lost today, if you lose the first game, you kind of have to win the second game or you could be in a lot of trouble. So
You reckon another US team's going to get grouped?
you know what, though? This Olympic team for the U.S. is not necessarily the best roster that they could have brought. And so I think once the roster actually got released, it was a dampening of expectations for what this team could do. That said, I didn't watch much of the game, but I heard that they played decently well. It's just France has guys that are being sold for 60 million to Bayern Munich on their team. So at some point you just are what you are and you have to deal with it. But anyways, anything else from Inter Miami's world? It feels like it's been kind of a quiet couple of days for Inter Miami over the last.
Yeah, I was expecting more transfer activities, some news in and around the team, but nothing much. I saw an Instagram post of Sergio Busquets doing the skills challenge, the passing skills challenge. And they had to edit out a few of his misses because it wasn't great. He still won that. And then Ricky Puig went ahead and beat the existing record, which was wild. And I've just noticed that the game's on. So that's about it.
Okay, then let's get into our main topics for the day. And I apologize, guys. You know, sometimes the midweek episodes get a little funky.
I think it's chill, relaxed. Get involved in the chat if you want. You know, we're not too fussed today. Nerves aren't there yet. But the more I think about the game, the more anxious I get. So maybe once we start talking about Leagues Cup, which we plan to do, that's when we'll hype up. But other than that, it's a nice midweek episode. So stroll along with us.
Okay, let's get into this because I did the hard work of listening to my own voice for an hour and 15 minutes. And as I'm sure most of you can relate, listening to your own voice is somewhat painful. I like to listen on 1.5 speed because then it sounds a little different and then it's more bearable. But anyways, this is some of the things that we were expecting from this 7-game stretch without, I can't talk today. I apologize, guys. This is what we were expecting from the 7-game stretch during the Copa America. The guys left on June 1st-ish, June 2nd, after that St. Louis game, and they were gone for trips to Philadelphia, a home game against Columbus, trips to Nashville, Charlotte, Cincinnati, and then these last 2 home games for Toronto FC and then the Chicago Fire. 7 games, we talked about what we were expecting, what the team needed to do. I thought there was a good chance we would get Suarez and Rojas back for these last 2 home games, and that ended up being true. And I thought we weren't going to get Messi back because he would be celebrating the Copa America win. Both true and false, but ultimately we still don't have Messi back. I'm just going to say some things that we said on that podcast, and I just want to hear your reactions. We need more defensively from our midfield was probably the biggest thing we talked about during that podcast. How do you think that we did?
I think we should rename our podcast the Drive Pink Crystal Ball because we seem to be predicting these things really well. I mean, listen, that was a very obvious piece of analysis. Everyone who watches Inter Miami on a regular basis knows that our midfield combination hasn't been the best. And you and I were very critical, but also adamant about the fact that we need to have a more defensive midfield to protect our back line. Yes, our defense isn't that strong. We have some faults in there in terms of physicality, in terms of running, but we can't buy anybody to change that, right? So the best way to do that and the best way to protect our midfield, protect our defense, is by bolstering the midfield. And yeah, it was a very obvious piece of analysis from our end. And what I'm most happy about is Tata Martino listened to that episode and decided to make the changes. So well done to us, man. We should potentially get a piece of his paycheck.
No, listen, it's a real honor to have someone like Tata listen to our podcast. something special. But no, I don't think it was that obvious. I think for a long time this season, we were blaming the central defenders. We were blaming our transition defense, and we put a lot of blame on Nico Freire and Toto Aviles and Sari Christoph and whoever was playing back there at center back. But I think it was becoming clear at this point that it's the midfield. It's the midfield, and we blamed it on the formation for a long time when we were playing a 3-5-2, and suddenly, and one of the things that sparked our conversation was that we saw Yannick Bright 2 weeks before this episode go into the midfield against Vancouver, and all of a sudden our midfield looked stable, sustainable, sound, solid, other S words that say the same thing. And it was good. And so we said, listen, throw Yannick Bright in that midfield and you will be defensively sound. You will be stronger. You will be solid in a way that allows you to not have to score 3 goals a game to get the results you want. And we played some good competition, right? Charlotte was in great form. Columbus was in phenomenal form. Cincinnati was in phenomenal form. And of course, maybe that didn't go so well. But so there were some good games, good road trips in there. We needed to be more defensively sound. And again, talking through where we were at that time, Diego Gomez was injured, right? He was coming off of, or was still injured for, 6 weeks or 7 weeks at that point. Federico Redondo had been injured for a while. And even though he was just coming back, we hadn't really seen him fit in well. Yannick Bright, we had only seen start that game against Vancouver, and he didn't even play in the next 2 games. Busquets was still, a liability in the midfield in transition. Kramaski was just starting to get regular starting games. It was, I think, actually easy to say this midfield needs to figure it out, but it wasn't exactly clear what the answer would be. And I didn't even mention Julian Gressel, who was starting basically every game in that midfield. How did we figure it out? Because we've seen a number of different midfields, and yet it does feel like we've had the same structure for almost all of our games over the last couple of weeks.
You know what it was? The more I think about it, the more my understanding of this, and I may be wrong about this, but I think Tata Martino stumbled upon gold. This was an experiment that he decided to do. The first game that we played in that stretch of 7 games was against Philadelphia, right? And we were down 1-0 in that game, came back 1-1 and won that 2-1, or basically came back in the last minute to win it. We were 9 men down. That game, we were forced to sit back and defend a lot. Did that quite successfully. And most of our players adapted really well to the situation of playing counter-attacking football. That, I think, set the blueprint for how we're going to play the rest of the 6 games. The more he played Yannick Bright, the more he realized that he actually might be the key to unlocking our midfield and protecting our back line. If I know Tata Martino correctly, I don't think he planned to play Yannick Bright in every single game. And I don't think he expected Yannick Bright to become such a key part of this team. But the more he performed, the more Tata Martino came to realize that, okay, without Messi, without the offensive firepower in front of us, we need to maybe play a little bit conservatively, a little bit more to our strength, sit back and counter and protect our backline as much as we can, because we're not going to be able to score 4 goals in every single game. Did that in a couple of games, saw that work, and that became the blueprint for the rest of the I will say that should be the blueprint going forward for the rest of the time that we play in the MLS, but we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, let's talk about Yannick Bright first, because he's our favorite subject and our favorite talking point. We go down to 10 men in that game at Philadelphia, and we had scraped back after giving up an early lead, and it's 1-1 early in the second half. We throw Yannick Bright on there to hold that draw. And of course, he's hugely instrumental in getting the victory because he had the interception and ball forward to Leo Alfonso, and then Alfonso finished it off. He gets the start in the next game, which was that game against Columbus, where Sergio Busquets talked about it. We felt like we were the underdogs. We felt like Columbus was the better team going into that game. We pull out a result, and that was, I think, Tata Martino's best tactical setup of the season in terms of playing to beat the opposition as opposed to just maximizing your strengths. And then he goes into the starting lineup at Nashville, plays really well. At Charlotte, plays he's not in the starting lineup at Charlotte, but we really struggle with Patrick Agimong. And so Tata throws him on at halftime in order to save his butt. Excuse me. And then
Exactly
he's a starter
what I'm
ever
saying.
since.
Exactly what I'm saying. I don't think he planned to start Yannick Bright every single game. And then he saw, oh, this guy is the real deal. He's actually doing exactly what this team needs him to do. And I'm just looking at the lineup against Columbus. And have I got this right? I don't think I have this right. Did Noah Allen start that game in defense?
Yeah, he was. We played a 5-2-3. We only had two midfielders.
That was the one time that our back five actually worked really well. Yeah, now I remember. Dude, Tata Martino is a tactical genius, honestly. The more I look back on this particular run.
That game, he absolutely got it right.
Yeah.
We looked at the strength of Columbus, which is playing through that midfield and creating opportunities through the midfield. And we said, we're not even going to fight you there. We're just going to press super high up the field. And if you beat it, we're going to sit way back low and we're going to defend. And it absolutely worked.
And I remember, I think that was the pregame show where we really struggled to figure out what the lineup was, right? And because we had five in the back. Was that the one? Or there was another one? Long story short, there were a lot of tactical decisions, a lot of team decisions, a lot of decisions across the board by the coaching staff that left us confounded at the start, but eventually we figured it out. And I'll be honest, this team feels completely different after this stretch of 7 games than it felt before that. You look at the result, we only lost one game against Atlanta, which was 3-1, had a draw against St. Louis, which isn't even that bad. You always get an MLS result. But before that, starting off from the CONCACAF Champions Cup, once we got kicked out, we won every single game up until the Atlanta United game. But it didn't feel as good as this stretch of 7 games has felt, because it felt like this team had some sort of vulnerability either in the midfield, either in the back line. It was not clicking together, and we were often relying on our superstars and Messi to try and pull us out of the depths of a defeat, essentially. What this 7 games has done, we have started playing as a unit. Everyone has started to pull their weight, and everything seems to be clicking a lot better. And I guess we're just spoiled as Inter Miami fans that one loss in God knows how many games and we start crying about it. Because I remember being very defeated after the Atlanta United game, and then the St. Louis game wasn't great either. You're like, okay, I've got to change things up.
You know what it was, though? For that first stretch of games after we lost to Monterrey, Messi and Suarez just exploded for offense, and Matthias Rojas came in, and we really looked good with him. He had a couple really big games in his first couple games, but even by the end of that stretch, it was a 0-0 draw at Orlando City. It was a 1-0 late winner versus DC United, where Campana got the goal in the 94th minute. And so in the first half of that, it was all offense and it was really fun. But by the end, the offense had slowed down a little bit. And by the end, when we got beat up by Atlanta and then got a 3-3 draw versus St. Louis, our midfield was just non-existent.
Yep.
It's not even okay. I want to stop before we go down this road too much, because we're just going to come back to Yannick Bright, and we already talk about him too much, although I do think he deserves it. But let's talk about the next thing that we really wanted, because I think we can both agree that solidity in the midfield, being sound defensively from the back to the front, is something this team really grew into over these last 7 games and was really good at, and it helped us get 2-1 result, 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, 2-1. 1-6, 2-1, 2-1, 3-1, right?
We don't talk about that.
Yeah. So anyways, let's go to the next thing that we talked about. And I was a little afraid when we started that podcast, and I wanted to ask you, but you completely talked me off the ledge. And I asked you, are we going to see a lot of the 3-5-2? Because we weren't going to have Messi. We weren't going to have Matthias Rojas. And so I felt maybe we didn't have a right winger. Maybe we would see some 3-5-2. And you very wisely told me that's not going to happen. And that made me feel a lot better. And you were exactly right.
I'll be honest. I don't remember saying those words. I am very happy about the fact that I was able to talk you off the ledge, and it's sort of proof that I am the voice of reason on this podcast. Uh, that being said, do you remember what my rationale was for saying we're not going to play the 3-5-2, or did I just spitball that and hoped it stuck?
I think you said something about Cello Ligon playing on the front line, and I was like, this is so irrational. I should probably just tune
Yeah.
this out.
Okay, that makes more sense.
No, but
Yeah,
it was what I was going to come to next, which was we thought it made a lot of sense to say we're just going to throw Julian Gressel up at the right wing. And then we talked about how this might fit his game perfectly. He had that really long stretch of starting games, finally does come off the bench against St. Louis, gets an assist that helped us get 1 point from that game. But that was before he kicked off into this great run of form that he's in. But we did talk about if you put him on the right wing and you make us sit a little bit deeper and you allow him to get forward in transition, have a little bit less defensive responsibility, that might be really good for him. And once again, I think we nailed it, man.
Yeah, and I think as much as we talk Yannick Bright up, and as much as he was quite very much responsible for the run of form that we're on, I think Julian Gressel is equally, if not more, to be held responsible in all good ways. He's really come off well in these last 7 games. And from where he was before that, I remember, man, everyone was frustrated. Every single Inter Miami fan, I think it was unison that everyone was calling for him to be benched. Everyone was calling him to be, not prioritized over some of the other young talent that we have. And Tata stuck to his guns. And kudos to Julian Gressel. Yannick Bright just comes to mind every single time we talk about this team. Credit to Julian Gressel, man. He really dug deep, and honestly, he was a leader in there in these stretch of 7 games. His offensive output was nothing short of Messi-esque, and to produce those numbers, we needed that, especially with the kind of results that we had with 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, 6-1, 2-1, 2-1. I think it was important to have that one consistent performer who constantly got the assists, contributed a couple of goals, and did the job for the team offensively, because I feel like every single player really stepped up, but Yannick Bright and Julian Gressel were among the standout performers. Without them, it wouldn't have been possible. That right wing is his through and through. And yes, Wookie, we will invite Yannick Bright to this podcast as soon as he knows who we are, because I feel like he owes us some sort of royalties for actually running his PR campaign for him.
One of the other conversations, and I don't want to touch on too much because we didn't see it really, was that we were worried about Busquets and Redondo in the midfield together. We saw them play together against Atlanta and St. Louis, and it was really bad. And the defensive positioning and picking up runners out of the midfield, I mean, it was just really not good. And we didn't really see it over the last couple of weeks because we've seen a lot of Busquets on the back line. We've seen Yannick Bright protect Federico Redondo, and so it's worked out well. I still think there's a question about what does that look like once more of our guys are back, specifically once we bring in David Martinez officially, and also once we get Lionel Messi back and Julian Gressel has to go somewhere. So still a question there. But the other final conversation I wanted to have was about Tata Martino. We have given so much of the credit for Inter Miami's success since last summer to Lionel Messi and Sergio Busquets and Jordi Alba and more recently Luis Suarez. And I think there was a lot of people that were very critical of Tata Martino, his performance, his technical adaptability, what he was really trying to build with this team. And we talked about how for the first time since he got to Inter Miami, he's not going to have this incredible talent advantage over all the teams he's playing. And it was going to be up to him to try and get results. And I think he did that in a number of games. He made some really important changes at halftime. He set us up really well in that Columbus game. So yes, I still think there was room for criticism, especially against Cincinnati, but for the most part, he did an excellent job, in my opinion. And I think that we talked about how he could come out of this looking really good. And over the last couple of broadcasts, you've heard the announcers say, Tata Martino might be in the running for that Manager of the Year award. How are you feeling about Tata Martino now?
Tata Martino is always an interesting character because it felt like throughout his tenure at Inter Miami, he's been in cruise control. And we spoke about this as well a few times that we discussed Tata Martino. His responsibility is to just pick the right team. Tactics, yes, are important, but in a team where you have so many superstars, I think the best tactic that you can adopt is let them play. Don't hinder them by picking the wrong team. And often it felt like, okay, he's picking the right team at certain times, but sometimes it's, he's making the wrong decisions and it just wasn't sticking. And just felt like he was in cruise control throughout his time here. And then this stretch of games came along and it was trial by fire, man. We knew that it would be make or break. In some other universe, we potentially lost half of the games that we played, and it didn't turn out too well for us, and we lost the Leagues Cup and the MLS Cup. But in this universe, we're going to go win the Leagues Cup, we're going to go win the MLS Cup, and we're winning everything. And I think when we look back at this season, hopefully one of the big changes and one of the big talking points is going to be how Tata Martino adapted in the run of 7 games, and is nothing short of some really bold decisions that he took. It's very easy to say, you know what, I'm not going to give up my principles. This Inter Miami team has been built on playing free-flowing, high-line football. We're going to attack, attack, attack. And if we lose, but we're not going to lose our identity in playing we're not going to lose our identity by playing defensively, basically. And he was like, no, I think results are more important at this stage. And we have to get as many points as we can so that we're in a good spot for the supporter shield. And he changed it all up. Yes, the game against Cincinnati, I think, was his tactical error that cost us that big loss. Of course, Sergio Busquets had that red card, but we were playing too high a line against one of the best forwards in the league. So room for improvement, but overall, Tata Martino has absolutely stuck the landing. I just hope he doesn't go back to his cruise control mode, because that could be the worst thing for this team. We're in an upward trajectory, and that only happens when every single unit of this club, including the management, the players, and the front staff, all are working in unison, and it feels like it's finally starting to happen.
Yeah. I think for the first time could start to see Tata Martino implement an identity on this team where we are solid through the midfield, solid defensively, and all 3 layers of our attack, and both, from the spine outwards, complemented each other well. And that, I think, is good coaching. I am ready to take it all back if we regress to what we were doing earlier on the season once we finally do get Lionel Messi back. But I think without Messi, you kind of have to play this way. Tata Martino's done that. And so, we'll see what happens when Messi returns. But for now, I think Tata Martino deserves a lot of credit. Should we talk about the games and what we thought was going to happen individually?
Yeah.
On the road at Philadelphia was struggling at the time. We thought there was a great chance to win. And boy, did Inter Miami make us sweat that one out. But ultimately, it was incredibly fun ending. The next game, which was at Nashville, the next game, which was versus Columbus, we both said we would be happy with the draw. At Nashville, which was the following game, we said that could be a really annoying, frustrating game. We could be in a lot of trouble there. We both thought a draw was pretty reasonable at Charlotte. At Cincinnati, we said, just try not to lose 3-0. So failed on that one. And then we said there was a good chance to win against both Toronto and Chicago. So while we were talking about the things we wanted to see, it doesn't feel like we had a ton of confidence that we were actually going to see it from Inter Miami. And they did deliver. They definitely delivered.
It's about once burnt, twice shy sort of a situation where throughout the season, we sort of called on Tata Martino to make some tactical changes, change things up in terms of the midfield structure. We've spoken about the team chemistry, and yes, we have a lot of good players in the midfield, but you need to have the right combination to be able to get the best out of it. And it felt like Tata Martino would always fall short of our expectations in some way or another. So I think we were right in being conservative about our thinking that it's potentially not going to happen. Yes, we want us to play a little bit more deeper. We want us to play a little bit more mid-block, solid. But it just felt like we didn't know whether Tata Martino was capable of adapting in the best way possible. Um, what he's shown, I think, throughout this 7 games, every single game we've had a different sort of a way of winning. Yes, I think the overall mold has been very similar in terms of the tactical setup and what we were trying to do, but every single game we learned something new about this team, and this team had to go through something different to try and get the result. Against Philadelphia, we made it really difficult for ourselves because we were 2 men down to 9 men. Against Columbus, it was a case of David versus Goliath, and we had to really step up tactically. We had to really step up in our performance levels, and then the rest of the games we've already spoken about. But what I really liked about this stretch of 7 games is now we can finally say that Inter Miami can play in different ways. And I'm a big proponent of, yes, a club should have an identity, but if that identity is not able to, and that play style is not able to get the results, it's not really an identity, right? And I'm a big proponent of having multiple different styles in which you can play. And now we know that is possible. And that makes this team that much more dangerous, because imagine going away to Columbus in the playoffs. That's going to be really difficult to do. But now we have a blueprint that we can rely on. We can, yes, I don't know if we're going to use that 5 at the back ever again, but we can have a little bit of a sit back and then play from a inferior position compared to trying to dominate the game. So it's really lovely to see that now we can work out different ways of winning football games.
Last thing I wanted to mention, just because I like hyping you up. I asked you what's the worst case scenario, and you said worst case scenario, 13 points out of 21. And I kind of laughed and I said, I think it's possible we get 3 points out of this 7-game stretch. And you talked me up a little bit, but I still didn't go past 8 or 9 as the worst case scenario. And best case scenario, I said maybe we can get 16 points. And you said you think 18 is on the table. Saur, you absolutely nailed it. We got 18 out of 21. Your optimism was well-founded, and it was because of a lot of the things we talked about over the course of that podcast. They all the vast majority of them came to fruition, and your faith in this team to make that happen was well-founded. So plaudits to you.
Yeah, man. As I always say, every time we do the predictions for a game, I will never root against my team, or I will never say that Inter Miami is going to lose. So I try to look at the silver lining, hope for the best, and if it doesn't happen, then we always have the post-game shows to try and vent. So that's always helpful.
Yes, it is. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about the Leagues Cup, because Inter Miami is the defending champion. Of course, last season, Messi shows up for the first game against Cruz Azul, puts his mark on American soccer, puts his mark on the MLS, puts his mark on that tournament. He has a crazy run as we beat Cruz Azul, we beat Atlanta, we beat Orlando City. That crazy game at Dallas where we win in penalties, and Benjamin Kermaski stepped up and played a huge role in that game. 4-0 win at Charlotte, a little less memorable, but then a 4-1 victory at Philadelphia in the semifinal, followed by that very difficult game in the final at Nashville that we ultimately win in penalties after a 1-1 90-minute performance. This is the defending champions, and yet I think back to last year's roster, and it feels like there's a lot of new players that might not feel like champions right now. Thinking about the key players we're going to rely on in this tournament, Luis Suarez was not there. Julian Gressel was not there. Matias Rojas was not there. Federico Redondo was not there. Yannick Bright was not there.
Chelo
Wiegand was not there. Toto Aviles, I don't remember if he made his debut in that tournament or if it was right after that tournament, but certainly he wasn't involved with most of it. So even Jordi Alba sort of had to work his way throughout that tournament because he had a child, so his debut was delayed a little bit beyond Messi and Busquets. Does this feel like a team that learned from last year's experience, or are we kind of gung-hoing it again and just saying, let's ride?
It's every time you start fresh, it's always let's ride again, right? You can rest on your laurels for a little bit, but it's a fresh start. It's a fresh tournament. all teams are different. There's a lot of good competition out there, and we've got some hungry, new, talented players who want to go for every single trophy. So I think it's a little bit a mix of both. Yes, we are the defending champions, but we got to start from scratch this time around as well. No complacency at all.
That said, the three best players for Inter Miami throughout that tournament were, of course, Lionel Messi, but also Robert Taylor and Drake Callender, who I expect to feature prominently throughout Inter Miami's run in this tournament. Anything else about last year's tournament? I mean, I don't want to do a full breakdown because we're talking about this year's tournament, but I don't know, any big memory or really fun moment from that tournament?
Of course, I think the biggest memory has to be Messi's first goal for Inter Miami, pulling us out of that. Scoring that free kick. I remember Beckham's reaction. Winning that game 2-1 was phenomenal. I hope Robert Taylor can rediscover his Leagues Cup form, and if that actually happens, then we know he's a Leagues Cup player, and we know that that's the tournament for him. What I will say was last time around, there was also a bit of a, you know how they talk about a new coach bounce? We had a bit of a new Messi bounce when we were playing the Leagues Cup, and a bit of a new players bounce last year. So this time it's going to be interesting to see how locked in the players really are. And I have no doubt that they're going to really try and go for this tournament. But hopefully we can get a few more additions, and maybe we are not even discussing a name that eventually comes on this team and makes a difference. So we'll see how the transfer market goes, and maybe Darwin Martinez has a say in defense. We'll see.
Okay, guys, here's what's new about this year's tournament. There was a lot of complaining last year about the Mexican clubs having to travel throughout the U.S. for that tournament, and so they did rearrange things a little bit. Inter Miami, out of the 47 teams in this tournament, 48 teams, 47 teams, they ranked 40th. Let's see, there's 29 in MLS, 18 in Liga MX. So they ranked 40th out of 47 teams, and that put them in pot 3. And the reason they got that ranking is because even though they've had a ton of success since last summer, it was based on your league record over the course of the 2023 calendar year. 34 games for MLS, and then 17 in the Clausura, 17 in Apertura for Liga MX. So 34 games each. It made it a nice, easy way to just rank teams. Inter Miami ends up in pot 3 because of last year's poor MLS form, and that gave them a very difficult draw. They get Tigres from pot 1 and Puebla from pot 2. We'll talk about Tigres in a minute, but Puebla gonna be our opening game on Saturday night. We will do the preview show and everything, so we don't have to preview them now, but that's a solid team, and it's Liga MX team. You mentioned earlier, our last trip, last 2 games against the Liga MX opponent in Monterrey did not end the way we wanted them to. We are playing without Lionel Messi, so this isn't going to be a gimme like we got last year with a really struggling Atlanta United team. It is going to be at home at Chase Stadium, but it's going to be something tough.
Yeah, I have a little bit of trauma from that Monterrey game. The more I think about it, we're playing in a neutral venue, right? But it's still a little bit traumatic to think about Inter Miami going up against a Mexican team.
This game is going to be this game on Saturday is at home. Is it Chase Stadium?
Okay. But yeah, I think the joint first in the Liga MX right now. I think Pumas, they're doing really well. I'm gonna have to look more into how they play in Pueblas. Oh, my bad. I looked into Pumas for some reason. Puebla is not. They're 13th.
Well, the season just started. The season just started.
Yeah, so they've only played 4 games. They only have 4 points, which isn't great. But again, this is a tournament. It's a one-off game, and if we lose to them, it's going to be really difficult for us against Tigres. So we want to make sure we do as well as we can against this team, because Tigres, I think, is the more difficult game among these, and we'll see how it plays out. But I do feel a little bit scared against the Mexican opponents.
I will say against Puebla, they were not great in the Clausura this spring. They finished last place. They gave up like 3 goals a game, almost 3 goals a game. So, I'm sure they strengthened their team this summer. Again, we'll do a whole breakdown on in the pregame show in the hour before kickoff. But our second game, which will be a week later. Last year we had the first 2 games. We played Saturday and Wednesday. This year we'll have a break. So we'll play Saturday and then the following weekend. But that game will be against Tigres. One of the rule changes this year is that the top 4 Mexican clubs get to play. They still play in the U.S., but they get to play as a home team in a hub city. And so there were cities throughout the southwestern United States that were designated as the home city, hub cities. And basically they're just cities that have a large Mexican-American population. And so they felt the teams there would have something of a home field advantage. And then also they would be able to just stay there throughout the month instead of having to travel across the country, always playing on the road. And Tigres, one of the teams that earns that privilege because they were one of the top 4 teams in Liga MX last year, they are going to be hubbed at NGR Stadium in Houston, which is where the Houston Texans generally play. This is a real stadium. It's a huge environment, and Inter Miami's heading there next Saturday to play Tigres, which is one of the best teams in Liga MX, one of the best teams in CONCACAF. For those that don't remember, they were in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. That's who Inter Miami would have played in the next round had we, ultimately they lost to the Columbus Crew, but that was a team we could have played in the next round if we'd beaten Monterrey. The Columbus Crew had to go through Tigres in order to get to Monterrey, but very, very good team nonetheless.
Yeah, and one interesting thing about this is that Puebla and Tigres are actually playing midweek before we play Tigres. So that game could essentially be the decider because we'll know what kind of result we want from that Tigres game. And we need. So that I think is going to be psychologically helpful because we'll have an idea of what we need to do. But hopefully it doesn't even come to that. We get the result against Puebla. Tigres gets the result against Puebla, and then we just battle it out.
Yeah. For those that don't remember, there's 3 teams in a group, and so you play each team once, and 2 out of 3 teams advance to the knockout stages. Basically, if you get 1 win, you're good to go. And so if we can win on Saturday night against Puebla, we should feel like we've already qualified for the knockout stages. And then, as you mentioned, that Puebla game can be a little more relaxed. And of course, we'll know after the Wednesday game whether Puebla is still in it or if it's already decided. Just wanted to put this up for the record. The next round, if we do advance out of the group stage, we are part of East Group 3. We would be matched up with East Group 6, which is Pachuca, the New York Red Bulls, and Toronto. Pachuca is the current CONCACAF Champions Cup champions. The New York Red Bulls are a team we've already played a couple times this year, and for 3 out of the 4 halves that we played them, they were the better team. And then Toronto FC, who we just saw, not as threatening. Even if, whether we finish first or second in the group, we would be matched up with a Group 6 team. So we'd play the second place team if we win our group. We'd play the winner of that group if we come in second. Not the easiest run of games. I tried to think back to last year to think if we felt good going into that tournament. And I know it was all excitement because of Messi, but I felt it was hard to actually lock down what the expectations were for Inter Miami because it was so new. It was so exciting, but we were just unsure of if it would all click. We were unsure how dominant Lionel Messi would be in this league. I think it was obvious to me. Well, the way I thought about it was Lionel Messi's going to be the best player in the league on day one, but is he going to be just the best player in the league, or is he going to be miles past the Lucho Acostas and the Cucho Hernandezes and the Charles Hills of the league? And of course, now we know he is miles past them, but it was unclear to me what our expectations should be for that tournament. This tournament, not quite the same. We are the defending champions. We are number 1 in the MLS. This is a team that is clicking. We have beaten some of the best teams in the league. We have victories over RSL, Columbus, the Red Bulls. We went on the road and got a draw with the Galaxy. This is a team that can beat the best teams both in the league and potentially on the continent, but we have to go prove that second part. We have to go prove we can beat Liga MX teams. What are your expectations for this tournament?
Honestly, it really depends on the kind of schedule and the kind of bracket we get. Obviously, getting out of the group is, don't even need to say, I hope we don't get grouped because that's going to be absolutely catastrophic. But as long as we get to the semi-final, I'll wait to see who we're playing against to decide. But a semi is given, right? You have to get there with the quality of players that you have.
I think we might be getting a little spoiled.
Oh no.
No, but here's
Hey,
what going
I didn't
back
say
to
final, and I didn't say my expectation is to win. So I'm still being a little bit pessimistic.
our previous podcast. I think you were more optimistic than me, and you were absolutely right. So I think you should predict us winning the whole thing, man.
Yeah, I think we're more than capable of winning the whole thing. But there's one thing about tournaments that you can like, you can dislike, but it's a fact, right? A game can go against you at any point in time. A referee decision, a stupid red card, an injury, your tactics can go out of the door. And then you don't necessarily have another game in hand to rectify that. In the league, you obviously have the next game to try and get back into form. In this, it's do or die. And I've been thinking how I'd want my team to play, and I'm sure we can talk about that later as well. But there's a lot of variables that are not necessarily in our hands to say confidently, "Oh, we're going to the final and we're winning this." So unless you're Real Madrid, you don't win a cup back to back to back to back to back, and you need to work really hard for it. So I think the stars need to align for this team to be able to get that trophy. But you know what? It seems like this season is our season, and I won't be surprised if we actually end up getting to the final and winning it all, because what better way to start the trophy run?
Yeah, like you said, anything can change your whole tournament. One moment generally doesn't change your whole season in the regular season because the next game you can recover or whatever. But in a knockout tournament, one moment, whether it's Sergei Kristov running up and missing a tackle and that leading to a goal going the other way, and that can change the entire complexion of a game, right? It doesn't even have to be the referees or VAR or offsides or injury. Like it could just be you make one mistake and that can cost you everything.
Exactly.
And unlike last year, I think we're expecting now to not have Lionel Messi throughout this tournament. Inter Miami made it ambiguous about when he would return, but I think the expectation is we're not going to see him until we return for the MLS. And so without that type of player available to you, you can't necessarily just overcome a mistake that leads to a goal against you. Pythias makes a good remark. David Ruiz red card in that first leg of the CONCACAF Champions Cup against Monterrey was absolutely game-changing. But at the same time, Diego Gomez misplays a ball, and that leads to their second goal, and we go down instead of getting a draw, right? There's a million things that can happen over the course of a game. I don't want to pinpoint blame or anything, but
and honestly, I think the deck is already stacked against us with that Messi injury. So it feels like,
with that in mind, it does feel like expecting this team to go to the semifinals is high expectations. I think it's absolutely realistic that we get grouped if we don't win on Saturday night. Especially if we lose on Saturday night and then having to go to Houston to try and get the result against Tigres, you're looking at a real uphill battle. Getting this first game, hugely important because it's going to set the tone, not just for the tournament, but also is going to get you into that second round. And you can feel like, okay, we can build our way into this tournament. We're not, hands behind our back, desperate from the first minute.
Yeah, one I think positive that I've seen over the last 7 games is it does feel like this Inter Miami team still has a gear to go up. It doesn't feel like we've hit our final form, as they say. I think we have another potential gear to unlock. I'm hoping it comes in this tournament. We'll see. But again, maybe there's a couple of signings that come in and can absolutely change that dynamic. And if David Martinez can hit the ground running, I don't want to put any expectations. I don't want to say he's going to be a transformative signing, but all it takes is one player to try and lift the team, whether it's Julian Gressel, whether it's Yannick Bright, whether it's David Martinez, or a new signing altogether. And when that happens, we'll see. But there's a lot of variables to account for.
Okay. Last year we saw Lionel Messi breakout, but we also saw Robert Taylor break out. We saw Drake Callender break out. Mark in the chat reminded me that Kermasky broke out. And even though we saw Kermasky be successful and impactful earlier on in the season, he had the clutch gene and the ice in his vein gene exposed in this tournament. He hit a couple really big penalties, including the game winner against FC Dallas. And I do remember, I asked you about moments you remembered, but I didn't tell this story. When Benjamin Kermasky goes up in penalties for the 5th penalty against FC Dallas on the road after that crazy game, 4-4, he already scored a goal to help rebuild the momentum. He came off the bench, scored like 2 minutes later to help us get back into that game, make it, I think it was 3-2 at the time, helped us climb back into a 4-4 draw. And then he steps up for that penalty. And I thought to myself, oh man, if he's stepping up in this moment, 18-year-old Benjamin Kermasky, he is absolutely going to nail it. There is no lack of confidence. There is no doubt in this player's mind. And he absolutely did. He won the game for us. So just a fun moment, which leads me to my next question. Who do you think could be the breakout players in this tournament if Inter Miami does have a nice, healthy run?
The more I think about it, and I'm not going to say the obvious word or obvious name, I think Redondo and Rojas might have really good tournaments. I have a feeling they're going to click into place very quickly.
Is the obvious name Yannick Bright? Is that who you were going to say?
Of course. Yeah.
Okay. No, just for the record.
Yeah.
Listen, one of the things that you want in this tournament is to see who can take their talent and really harness it. And I think when you watch Federico Redondo, you can see the talent, you can see the upside, you can see the tools. Same thing with Matías Rojas. But it's just a matter of, is it going to click in this game where he can be impactful, where he can be a game changer? And so a nice run from one or both of those players, I agree with you, could be really impactful. Here's another name for you, Ian Frey. We've seen him a couple times now look really special down that right side. If he's a guy that plays consistently as a right back in this tournament and is getting goals, is looking like he belongs on a field with any other player in this region, in this continent, I think he could be a guy that we look at as say his stock rose significantly during this tournament because he's going to have to go up against really good competition. And I still think he has the talent, and we've seen it over the last month, to stand out even in that environment. So
yeah, but I would say that's not even a surprise though. I feel like our expectations from Ian Frey are astronomical. We know he's going to be performing well. It's just a matter of how much he plays. And I won't be surprised if Ian Frey goes and scores more goals than half the team. He has that potential to be very, very transformative for this team. And it's, for me, I think that's an obvious answer again. I would say even Julian Gresso might be another one who has a, gear to kick up, and we'll see what happens. But for me, there's one reason that I chose Redondo. And the more I watch him play, there are a few, chinks in his armor. But what I really like about that player is his confidence. He may not be having the best game, but he's not shy of directing the flow of the game. He doesn't disappear in games, which is always helpful. Yes, he gasses out. That's a different story altogether. But he asks for the ball. He dictates the midfield a little bit. Yes, he might be in a wrong spot at one point in time that leads to a goal. But there's something about that player that tells me all he needs is a couple of good games and a couple of good runs in that tournament. Maybe a goal, maybe an assist or two, and he could really change the nature of this team.
I have one other name, but just about Ian Frey. I think we know that these guys have the talent if they can put it together, but I don't think everyone across the league knows just how good Matías Rojas can be, just how good Ian Frey can be. I think there's an underestimation of what those guys' talent levels could be. The other thing I wanted to mention is that Diego Gomez and Paraguay lost their first game in the Olympics, and so did Benjamin Kermasky and the U.S. Olympic team. They play their second game on Saturday.
I know where you're getting at.
And if they lose that game, both of them, they could be heading home after the group stage, which ends on next Tuesday, which means they could be back for Inter Miami the following weekend when we play Tigres in Houston, and certainly would be available after that. Listen, I hope they do great. I hope we don't see them because they're getting medaled in the Olympics. That's what I want.
And they're playing for the national team. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I want for them. But I think maybe we wrote them off as guys that are just going to be gone for this whole tournament. And after today, and it is only one day, maybe we did that a little too soon. The other name I wanted to say, which probably is the most likely, is Luis Suarez. He is a winner. He's a champion. He has not the number of trophies that Messi has, but probably pretty darn close. He's a guy that I think is really going to step up in this moment and provide something for Inter Miami that really is going to help us. If we can play sound defensively, we throw Yannick Bright in the midfield, have a well-structured midfield, and Drake Callender does his thing. Luis Suarez being responsible for 1.5, 2 goals a game, which he is capable of, could make or break this tournament. And part of me thinks our success in this tournament really rests and relies on what we get out of Luis Suarez from a goal scoring and goal creating perspective. Is that really the obvious choice, or am I
that's a really good shout. I will say Luis Suarez, when he doesn't play against Chicago or NYCFC, could potentially be the player of the tournament. So yeah, very, very good shout. We need him to perform to be able to go far in this tournament, because he's the kind of player where we're losing 1-0 or we're drawing 1-1, and he pulls something out of the hat to, a volley from outside the box, or making a really good run or a pass that unlocks the defense and gets us back into the game. He's capable of doing that. He's done that in the past for us. It just feels like we haven't seen him in so long that we've sort of forgotten how high his output level for us has been. And in this tournament, if we go on a run, Luis Suarez is going to be an integral part of this team. And at this point, I feel like we've covered practically every single member of this team. We've got Ian Frey in defense, Yannick Bright in the midfield, Julian Gressel on the right, Redondo in the midfield, Luis Suarez up top. Yeah, we've covered all bases, haven't we? And then Drake Callender needs to obviously stop goals.
That does, though, if you have a breakout campaign or tournament from Drake Callender and from Toto Aviles and from Yannick Bright and from Julian Gressel and from Luis Suarez and from Federico Redondo and from Matias Rojas, and maybe a repeat of what we got from Robert Taylor, that sounds like a team that has every chance to repeat as champions. So I ask you, as we end this episode, will Inter Miami repeat as Leagues Cup champions in 2024?
On the current run of form, every single day I'll say yes. Even if we're losing every single game before that, I will still say yes. So never count my team out. I think we have everything capable, like all capabilities, all tools in the box. We just need to make sure we use it.
Here's my answer. I think that is asking way too much of this team. There are so many good teams in this conference or confederation in Liga MX and the MLS that it only takes one of them to have their night and for us to have a bad night, for us to lose. And with that said, I think Inter Miami is going to win every single game. And so I don't know how those two predictions go hand in hand, where I don't think we're going to win it overall, but I do think we're going to win every single game. We will have to see anything else before we wrap it up for tonight.
It's going to be a very exciting stretch of games. I think the Puebla game is going to tell us all. And once that game's out of the way, the result from that game is potentially going to determine how our next post or pre-game and post-game go against Tigres. That being said, enjoy the ride, guys. Enjoy Inter Miami playing against some new opponents, some new challenges. Hopefully Messi is back soon. And if you're watching the All-Star game right now, it doesn't seem to be going well for the MLS team. But they don't have Messi. That's why. Well, we don't have Messi either for the first couple of games. But regardless, we have other players, and we're going to win. So we'll see what happens.
Guys, we will be back for the pregame show as always, 1 hour before kickoff. It is a special time for the Leagues Cup. Normally games are at 7:30 Eastern. I believe it's at 7 Eastern, but it might be at 8 Eastern. So whatever time it is, we will be there 1 hour before kickoff, only on YouTube. So if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or any platform of your choice, that is only available on YouTube, but come join us because it is a lot of fun. Get in the chat. It is the way we get our nerves out as we head towards kickoff. Saur, thank you so much for being here. Everyone in the chat, thank you so much for being here. And we will see you on Saturday as Inter Miami prepares to defend their Leagues Cup championship. Let's go, Herons.
Back to back, baby.